Good evening all. Tonight I have some true and rather strange paranormal stories submitted by my subscribers. So if you have any stories, just send me an email, which will be stated in the description as well as on the screen throughout. Thank you. Number 1. All my life, both my grandmother and my mother say I'm sensitive to what they believe is the spirit realm. Both were very into paganism and Wiccan things, so I believe their use of tarot cards and Ouija boards had some play in it. My mother would say as a baby I'd walk and talk to people who weren't real. Whilst this isn't that strange for a toddler still learning to talk and have a strong imagination, what would confuse my mother is that she'd find me in places that were almost impossible for a 2-year-old like myself to get to by myself. She'd find me up in trees and stuck in my great-grandmother's basement. The strangest was when she woke up in the middle of the night to me crying, since my crib was in the corner. One side of the crib was pressed against the wall. She found me in between that wall and the crib. As I got older, I began to see things on my own. Now that I'm older, I can safely say, as a young adult, some things weren't spirits, like seeing figures in my closet, but some things still confuse me. My mother, now pregnant with her 3rd child, her fiancé and my half-sister Gina, all moved out from my grandmother's house and into a trailer park, not too far away from my old home. One night, I remember waking up on the top bunk of my bunk bed and climbing down. Gina was still asleep, so I walked where my mother and her fiancé were sleeping, and in front of the empty crib where my future half-brother would sleep, I saw a shadow figure. I remember his eyes looking like candle flames as he just stared at the crib. He looked at me, and I ran to my room. On a similar occasion, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I curiously looked out of my window to see if my dogs were okay in the dark. But what I saw was a figure, much like the one in the previous story, except its whole body was red, like fire. It looked at my dog and looked at me. I was more scared for my dogs than myself. Number 2. In the 1st grade, we moved for the last time. As we pulled in for the first time, I looked in the window and saw a man standing and just staring at the car. We found quite a lot of strange objects in the house, such as the attic being filled with baby dolls, a fake coffin full of baby food. From the beginning, I've heard whistling coming from nowhere, and apparitions of an old man and a small girl. I had known an old man died in our house, so I just assumed it was him both times. Perhaps him pretending to be a little girl was a way of him to try and get me to feel safe around him. I'm not quite sure. However, for a while things stopped. Until I was 14, that is. Both my dogs and my new puppy had recently died, and so had my mother's fiancé's father. I was going through a hard time since I was constantly going in and out of hospital for issues with my digestive system. I remember waking up and all the stress getting to me. I was having sleep paralysis. I tried to close my eyes and turn my head, but it wasn't helping. A large shadow stood in the doorway, and the fake head that I used for my cosplay was looking at me and smiling. Something was touching my face and saying my sister's name over and over again. Gina. Gina. Oh, Gina. I saw myself in the mirror and now I was laughing at myself. When the episode was over, everything went back to normal. Normal reflection, normal shadows, normal mannequin head. I bolted to my sister's room and I was so happy to see she was okay. When I got back to my room, I saw something odd. My hand-me-down tarot cards owned by my mother and my grandmother before was lying on my bed instead of being on my nightstand. Number 3. My older sister had a ghost that followed her around for years. I lived with her once for about 3 months, and so much weird stuff happened in that time. All my sister would say to me when I mentioned it was that her ghost didn't like me being there, whatever that meant. Things like going to bed with everything locked up and switched off, and waking up in the morning with the back door open, lights on and the kettle switched on. One night, my sister and I were getting ready to go out, and I asked to borrow her liquid foundation. I used it and put it back where she kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she's asking me for it, and it was nowhere to be seen. She accused me of taking it and made me buy her a new one, and refused to listen to my side of the story. About a year or so later, when she was packing to move to a new house, she found the makeup in a shoebox with some old letters. The shoebox was in a zipped up suitcase that was underneath her bed. However, probably the most scared I've ever felt was one afternoon when I was the only one in the house, which never happened as 4 other people lived there. I'd arrived home from work and headed straight to the bathroom. All the doors and windows etc. were closed. I was standing in the bathroom and started squeezing a pimple on my chin when a female voice in the hall said, "Stop picking your zits." It was loud enough and sounded real enough, and at the time I thought it was my sister. So I laughed, told her to fuck off, and asked what she was doing for dinner. No answer. So I stuck my head out into the hall. No one was there. I searched the house top to bottom, and there was no one home. I sat out on the front porch until someone else got home because I didn't want to be in there alone. Number 4. I was babysitting my niece once while I was staying at my brother's place, and they had the baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and started dozing off when I heard some whispering and realised it was coming from the monitor. I initially thought it was some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV, there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I have never been more terrified in all my life, but the shadow was clearly there where it had not been before. I ran to my niece's room and I looked around and saw nothing. But I took her the hell out of there. I went back to the TV and the shadow was clearly gone. I told my brother what happened, and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she'll freak out. But that he had seen the same thing several times now, with the same whispering. They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and when my niece was just learning to talk, she would tell her mum about her special friend. To this day, it scares the shit out of me. When they moved out, my brother told me my niece had become inconsolably sad because she would miss her friend. Her mum would tell her she could bring him along, but all she would say was that he couldn't leave the house. We have never to this day told her about the damn shadow, and she apparently never saw it. So that's it for this one. If you did enjoy, or if you're new, leave a like and comment, or even subscribe. Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for listening.